Good morning to everyone. My name is Sotiropoulou. I'm the technical director of this interdisciplinary conference. We are at the last day of the conference dedicated to social sciences, humanity and economy. The first session of the day is dedicated to economy. We have about 14 speakers for today's sessions, and we are going to start with the first session regarding the economy. Our moderator is Professor Chymis Athanasios. Athanasios, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Charakopoulos. I welcome everybody to this third day of the Athens Calls Athens conference. It's an honor to be here. I want to thank Mr. Charakopoulos, Mr. Pathos, and all who contributed to the successful to this successful conference. It's the first Athens Calls Athens conference. So I am the moderator of the session Economy, and I want to welcome our panelists. Dr. Petrakis will not be here with us. Instead, we have Professor Kostis Pantelis. We also have Professor Petrakis, Pierrakos, Professor Petkidis, Bourantas. We have a guest from India, Dr. Singth, and the last one is Sotiropoulou. So glad we have a woman with us. I saw the other sessions had more than one woman. We are lucky we have one here at the economy session. So with no further ado, I will start my presentation first, and so we can have more time for the rest. One thing I would like, before I start, I would like to ask you kindly is, we have many presentations at this session. We have 4 presentations until the break, which is at 10:35, and then we have another 3. So please, let's try to be maximum 20 minutes. The best would be 15 minutes. So we have also time for questions and answers, and we do not exceed the time limit. So let me start my presentation. I hope it's now shown on your screen. What's going on?
You canceled it. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I tried to make it full screen.
Good morning. Yes, it's fine now. It's fine.
Okay, thank you. So my name is Athanasios Chymis. I work for the research institute. It's called the Center of Planning and Economic Research, CEPE. And my background was in agricultural economics, and I continued the master's degree and the PhD on agricultural economics. And I mostly focus on the interface between ethics and economics. So corporate social responsibility and new institutional economics, this kind of stuff. I hope the presentation is interesting. We'll see. Okay, so ethics and economics, merging individualism and collectiveness. The organization of the presentation is the following. First, we'll give some definitions. So what is ethics, what is economics, and how they relate. The problem I want to underline is that most people believe that ethics and economics do not relate. So we'll see why this is the case, some historical roots of this view, as well as how we, the economists, and our profession have contributed to this view. Then I'll show that economics and ethics actually never got a divorce. They are always together. It couldn't be otherwise. And we discuss about the conditions that facilitate humanity to move towards prosperity and sustainability. I hope I have time to show you a short video that actually encapsulates in a very nice manner what I would like to show you. And then we draw some conclusions. So what is ethics? Ethics is a system of moral principles that affect how people make decisions and lead their lives. The etymology is from the Greek word ethos, which means custom, habit, character. Ethics is concerned with what is good for individuals and society, how our actions affect others, and what are our rights and responsibilities. Economics, on the other hand, is a social science also, that studies how people interact with things of value. Value is also a factor of economics, of ethics. In particular, the production, distribution, and consumption of goods and services. The etymology is from economia, the Greek word, which means management of a household. Now, how they relate? Both talk about values, goods, interaction between people. Both are social sciences, moral philosophy and economics. Moral philosophy is for ethics and economics. Of course, all economists know that economics derive from ethics, from moral philosophy. Adam Smith, the father of modern economics, was a moral philosopher after all. And something that to most non-economists may not be known is that before the well-known book, The Wealth of Nations, Adam Smith had written The Theory of Moral Sentiments, a book where he talks about empathy and about the interest to the other. And then he wrote his Wealth of Nations book, where he wrote about the self-interest and how these two combine. So our question is, if they are so related, why do people believe not only that they are not related, but also that economics are, at least in some cases, unethical? Well, back in 1850s, Thomas Carlyle, a historian, philosopher, a multidisciplinary person, coined the term economics as a dismal science. The reason today sounds outrageous because he argued in favor of the reintroduction of slavery. Economics as science back at that time actually did not support his idea. So he disliked economics and he coined this term, the dismal science. Today, there are plenty of depressing outcomes we often hear and read about, such as poverty, economic inequality, potential loss of millions of jobs due to technology, environmental degradation, all these negative things that we get bombarded from the mass media, which of course are true to some extent. What we're going to show here is that there is also a positive effect of economics that is not so published and distributed, so people focus on the negative aspect. Economics are also accused that it promotes self-interest and greediness rather than altruism. So let's go now. This was the historical roots of this, of why people still believe that economics is not such an ethical science. Now let's see where is the fault of economics and ourselves, the economists. The neoclassical paradigm, which is the dominant model taught in schools and universities around the globe, describes an economic world where ethics is irrelevant. And it is irrelevant because as long as we have competition, people as they are self-interested, that guarantees prosperity in the whole society. This is what Adam Smith actually said. Many of us know the well-known the famous quote from Adam Smith. It is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, and the baker that we get our food, but it is thanks to their self-interest. It's not that they are interested in us, but they are interested in them in making money. And actually, this is a serious point and a good point of economics, that if you want to make money, you have to offer something. This is what Adam Smith meant and what the neoclassical paradigm is based upon. So there are some shortcomings of the neoclassical, the neoclassical economics model. This is the NCE, the neoclassical economics. So it's not a wrong model, but it's not perfect. Of course, it's not perfect. And many great economists, such as Coase, Ronald Coase, Herbert Simon, Oliver Williamson, Douglas North, all these guys have gotten a Nobel Prize, and many others, show that the world is not static. It's not the way the neoclassical economics present. They present a perfect equilibrium, or perfect equilibrium in general. They present a world that everybody knows a priori what he's going to do. So the price mechanism is costless. So everything functions smoothly. Well, this is not the case, of course, because we are humans. Information is restricted, and our behavior depends on several factors, not only economic factors. What is right with the neoclassical economics model? Well, we said before, Adam Smith stressed the concept of competition. Milton Friedman, another Nobel laureate, also stressed the concept of competition, and he said that as long as we have, as long as the firms and the persons behave within the rules of the game, so within obeying the rules, the laws of society, and the ethical laws, those laws that are not written, we should be free to pursue our own self-interest. This is the way to maximize social benefit. Well, the rules of the game, it's Douglas North who defined what is the rules of the game, and it's the institutions. So Douglas North and the other economists that I mentioned you before, basically what they did is they improved the neoclassical model by entering in the game the concept of institutions, the concept of transaction costs, that the neoclassical economics were taken for granted. For instance, Milton Friedman was taken for granted that firms and business would obey the law and would follow the ethical custom of the society. So this was an assumption in the neoclassical model. Douglas North and the others, Ronald Coase, said, well, we cannot assume that because it's not the case. Williamson referred to the opportunism, which he defined as the self-interest with guile. So somebody may try to trick you. And we cannot assume that everybody is perfect and everybody pursue his own interest without trying to conceive someone else. But in general, it's true that competition brings out the best of ourselves. Now, let's see, prosperity and well-being depend on the quality of the market. So in order for competition to work, we need good institutions. That is basically what the new institutional economics said, and what they added to the neoclassical model. If you don't have institutions that support the function of competition, then you don't have the competition that you want, and you don't have the results that you want, the results that Milton Friedman was expecting. So institutions are necessary in order to guarantee that we have freedom, rule of law, protection of property rights, effective and efficient justice system. this is what institutions is about. And we all know very well that Greece, if we look, for example, at the World Economic Forum report every year, the index that they use there, we see that Greece does not rank very high, so institutions are not very strong in Greece. On the contrary, in other countries like the US, France, England, Germany, institutions are strong, and that's why capitalism there works better. And competition promotes social welfare. So freedom is very basic for competition to work. Now, what are the results of the market mechanism? I probably forgot here to tell you that the market, the Greek word for the market is agora. And it's exactly what the ancient Athenians did when democracy emerged in ancient Athens. People were gathering together to talk, to exchange ideas, not only to exchange ideas, but to exchange goods. This is the market, that's the agora. And this is the free and open market that Milton Friedman was talking about. Now, the results of the market mechanisms. Of course, it's not perfect, but let's see some data that prove, contrary to what we probably hear every day in the news, in the evening news, that the world is getting better, not worse. So since 1993, the number of people living in extreme poverty, and that is defined by living with less than $1.9 per day, has halved from 2 billion to 1 billion in 2013. That is in 20 years. Since 1990, the number of children in the world who died from preventable diseases also was cut in half from 13 million to 6.3 in 2013. The percentage of girls in developing countries who completed elementary school has gone from 50% up to 80%, again in 33 years. Since 1983, the number of countries that were democracies more than tripled from 17 to 56. So I mentioned here some data which encompass economy, like poverty, health, education, and politics, democracy. Now, I would like to show you this short video, which is, now let's see how we do it. I hope it's visible. This video is from, can everybody see it?
No, I think that you have to get out of your presentation. And
well, yes, I did. How can I do? Can I do share screen again? And
yes. Try to make share screen on the YouTube.
all right. Is it okay now?
Yes, yes.
All right. So this guy is Hans Rosling, a very famous health scientist who produced this video. So I will let you, it's just 4 minutes. We are on time. Let's watch this and then we continue. So that was our video. I hope you enjoyed it. And now I'm going back to the presentation. Share screen again.
It's okay, it's okay.
All right. So some conclusions. Economics and ethics go hand in hand, and they go hand in hand because such a tremendous improvement and positive evolution of humanity could not become true unless economics and ethics go together. If economics and ethics were not going together, then we wouldn't have such nice results. This is not to say that everything is perfect. We are humans and nothing can be perfect. There is always room for improvement. And this is why we should still strive to reduce poverty. The COVID-19 has put some burden on this track because people, instead of decreasing the number of people in extreme poverty, we have now them increasing. And we should feel ashamed as a humanity if there are still people around who starve. But still, we need competition is #1 factor, which coupled with institutions, strong institutions, can make things move forward. We need to make sure that we always compare two realistic situations, not an ideal to a realistic one. This is what the new institutional economics defined as nirvana fallacy. It's when you compare, for example, the situation that the humanity is now to a situation where there is no poverty, everybody lives up to 100, everybody has access to clean water. So this is a nirvana fallacy because we compare a realistic situation with a non-realistic one, an ideal one. So we should compare two realistic scenarios and choose, of course, the best. Competition under a framework of functioning institutions promotes societal well-being by bringing out the best of ourselves. But again, I want to stress that we need strong institutions. It's not competition by itself. We need to have laws. Competition in free societies with good institutions brings people together and makes them cooperate. This is another positive aspect of competition. People cooperate thanks to the competition. The world, of course, is not perfect, and we need to do a lot to eradicate poverty, but with good institutions in place, we are on the right track. I want to thank you. It's 9:34, and let me take this out. Okay, and now.
Sorry, Athanasios, just to say something. Thank you very much for keeping the timelines of the sessions. And before we go to our next speaker, I would like to thank again Professor Petrakis Panagiotis for his quick response to replace himself due to unforeseen circumstance. I mean, he's sick. And the replacement of him by the Kostis Pantelis, adjunct lecturer in economics, Department of Economics at National and Kapodistrian University of Athens. Thanks to Professor Petrakis' action, we can keep the flow of the session without changes of last minute. Thank you very much. Sorry for the interruption. The floor is yours again, Athanasios. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to welcome Professor Pantelis Kostis. He is an adjunct lecturer in economics at the Department of Economics at the National and Kapodistrian University of Athens. So, Professor, you can start your presentation. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me well. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So Today, I'm going to replace Professor Petrakis due to sudden circumstance. She cannot participate in the really on this great conference. It's a very significant action, surely, for all of us. And thank you, Professor Chymis, for your great presentation before. So I'm going to share my screen to start the presentation. Just a minute, please. Can you see my presentation? No, not. Can you see that? No.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Okay.
Okay, no.
Yeah,
Sorry.
now it's okay.
Okay, so let me make it full screen. Okay. The presentation is about the role of cultural background as a unifying element of economic development. My name is Pantelis Kostis, as we told you before. I'm since 2017, I've obtained my PhD, and since then I'm an adjunct lecturer of economics at the Department of Economics of the National Captivator University of Athens. And I'm coordinator of Professor Petrakis. We have made many research on issues about cultural background and how culture affects economic developments and economic growth and economic action and human action. This presentation concentrates some basic conclusions we have made in the past. So this is why I was able to make this presentation in this sudden time in which I was informed about this sudden replacement of Professor Petrakis. So let's begin. Let me start with the connection between culture and how crises, an external crisis or economic shocks that happen in societies and in economies affect culture. The psychology of the societies alters in times of crisis and change. And typical examples are the recent global financial crisis and the COVID-19 pandemic, which altered significantly the psychology of the societies. The effects of such shocks are about to be detected in social trends and attitudes for many years to come. So under certain but very rare conditions, a crisis and its recovery can be a starting point for a new start to a new cycle of development. But crisis and recovery situations are creating traumas that accompany decision making in the future. The cultural background has a long-term homocyclic effect. When we are in the economic prosperity phase, there are a number of anti-growth aspects of social values that are linked to lack of openness, because everyone is scared to be open to other people and to other economies. However, in times of recession, this social model itself is giving rise to lines of defense linked to inward looking, while at the same time opposing its change. Thus, during the crisis, in-group collectivism, and when I say in-group collectivism, I mean, take as example, the role of family, the role family has for human beings. So in-group collectivism helps to reduce the negative effects of the crisis. However, the fact that in the very difficult phase of recession, the cultural background works as a life savior, gives it the chance to survive and possibly even stronger in the development phase, where it is now acting as an obstacle. And this is what we can call as a cultural anti-growth trap. And recently, and now, unfortunately for all of us, for the whole universe, we have the COVID-19 pandemic. Major crises may have significant effects on individual behavior. Just as an economic or a natural disaster can damage people's psychology and change consumption and investment patterns, so can health disasters. A health crisis taking the form of a pandemic changes the levels of uncertainty and confidence in society, which are key drivers of economic growth. After all, from knowing from the past, the major lethal communicable diseases in the history of the mankind, such as the Black Death or the Spanish flu, have been points of social, political, as well as economic transformation, affecting culture and human behavior. The common feature of all pandemics in the past is the rapid spread not only of the virus, but also fear and uncertainty, which can spread panic among masses. And this can cause a sudden change in the behavior of individuals, such as consumer mania for specific products. So more generally, the consequences of panic may become permanent due to social unrest and widespread mistrust for all, for other people in the society or from the government or for other economies. In the case of COVID-19, people embrace the appropriate hygiene rules and protective measures, but at the same time, they consider that their fellow citizens and governments do not correspond enough in the needs of the society. So determined action by governments to limit the pandemic and accurate and timely information to the population on the nature and extent of diseases are vital to mitigate fear and uncertainty and increase tolerance or protect mental health of citizens, or in order to achieve some balance between prevention, real risks, and how people react on those risks. All those that I mentioned, all those practices contribute to maintaining social confidence, which is particularly important for preventing and tackling the pandemic as it increases the people's willingness to adopt the recommended behavior. And so let's now see the case of Greece. The cultural dimensions and social psychological stereotypes that prevail in the Greek society measure a very long life that goes beyond the founding of the modern Greek state. This does not mean that they are immobilized and consolidated over time, although their systematic presence is generally observed not only in the Greek economy, but in all the societies of the world, and not as defined by the national borders. And generally, these are the gnostic constructs that link the past to the present and determine the future as well. And in this table, you can see a comparison between Greece and European Union of 27 countries based on data that are obtained from the European Social Survey, the 10th wave, I think is the 5th wave of data released from the European Social Survey that are dated back to 2010. 2010 was the last year that European Social Survey presented some data for Greece. So this is why we go back to that period in the outbreak of the financial crisis of 2008. What we can see from this data. In Greek society, there are essentially social psychological stereotypes which have considerable social and economic reflections on the productive and social environment of the Greek economy. And these characteristics are directly linked to each specific characteristics. These are, let's start from the first lines. First of all, Greek society is characterized by lack of trust. As you can see, 25.3% of Greek society argues that it can trust most people. in society, while the figure for all European societies is on 39.8%. Also, 53.8% of the Greek society argues that most people are trying to take advantage of them, while the figure for EU is 30.6%. And this lack of trust acts as a hindrance on investment and increases transaction costs. Moreover, it gives place and space for populist policies to emerge. Moreover, Greek society is characterized by protection of in-group collectivism, and in particular, there is an important role that is attributed on family. 58.8% of the Greek society considers it particularly important that the work it chooses should enable the combination of work with care for the family, while the corresponding figure for EU is 35.82%. And let me say that the role of family in Greece is crucial. The absence of a broad social state and its services is essentially replaced by family care. And in this way, social cohesion and family-based social capital are being broadened. And as long as the trust and mutual service of family members increases, society is primarily driven by family entrepreneurship on the basis of independent family planning. And this is the reason behind the prevailing production model of the Greek economy, with the large number of small businesses. And the strong family cohesion observed in the Greek society reduces its spatial mobility, for example, where the child of a family will work, and affects the mobility of career guidance over time. And as a result, a significant part of the labor force is also restricted while being in an active age group, such as that of women, which is cut off from the labor market. And this condition has multiple social and economic implications. Another cultural value that emerges is that of uncertainty avoidance. 58.9% of Greek society considers it especially important for them to live in a safe environment, while the figure for EU is 30.9%. In addition, 59, almost 60% think it is especially important that the government of the country should show an image of security, while the corresponding figure for EU is only 31%. And this dominance of uncertainty leads to a reduction in investment horizons, but also more generally to the avoidance of investment decisions and thus to a denial of innovation. Uncertainty avoidance can also lead to the acceptance of ideas about a closed society, you could say. Moreover, there is a strong role of religion in Greece, namely the Orthodox Christian concept. 92% of Greek society belongs to religion, while the figure for all EU societies is 64.6%. And this Orthodox Christian perception of Greek society seems to be moving in the opposite direction to the present property and the process of maximizing profit, which is necessary incentive to trigger the progress of growth. Another cultural value is that of performance orientation. 29.9% of Greek society considers it particularly important to think about new ideas and be creative, while the figure of EU societies is only 20%. And in addition, 23.3% of the Greek society considers it important to be rich, to have money and expensive assets, while the figure for all EU societies is only 16.7%. So there is therefore a tendency to seek performance in effort. Moreover, there is a non-acceptance of inequalities in Greece. 55.5% of Greek society considers it especially important that all individuals are treated in the same way and that everyone has the same opportunities, while the same figure for EU societies is 34.3%. And this acceptance of inequalities, although negative in social terms, is usually found in societies which have achieved higher levels of economic performance. And the impact of this cultural background extends to a number of economic activities. In general, these have an anti-developmental character, we could say, a character that opposes economic development growth. And the main direction of this is to stay on anything that is familiar, and the lack of competition and control, and the prevalence of paralysis caused by uncertainty and hence of anxiety about taking risky position, and finally lack of confidence. And the last cultural value that could say that is in a great percent characterizes the Greek society is that of loss aversion. Loss aversion indicates that people are more sensitive to loss than gains. In other words, the absolute subjective value of a particular loss is greater than the absolute subjective value of an equivalent gain. This is based on the work of Kahneman and Tversky, who gained the Nobel Prize for their research on that. So that is, society is characterized by loss aversion in the forms of supporting for its existing status quo. Greek society appears to be strongly characterized by the behavior of averting damage and loss. And this may be the case following the judgments of COVID-19 as well. The result of the study of Chymis et al. On 2017 are clear on that, where the authors conclude that the Greek society has the lowest score between 32 countries in loss aversion. And this lowest score means more loss aversion. Greece is the most loss averted society between the 32 countries included in their survey. This may justify a stronger orientation toward the acquisition of speculative opportunities and benefits, contrary towards productive in investment. Citizens' behavior toward economic policy and social issues is important in shaping economic policy for two main reasons. Economic policy is based on policies which deal first with the efficiency of the functioning of the economy, and secondly with income distribution, let's say with, mainly through taxes. However,
sorry, you just have 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. However, economic policy is shaped by a political party on the basis of its program obligations and its pre-election commitments. Its program obligations correspond to the needs of the citizens it represents and the objectives set by its political leadership to serve. And when an economic policy is implemented, citizens adapt to it either by implementing its effects or by adapting and possibly neutralizing it. And the citizens' view on economic issues are therefore of key importance on the effectiveness and the outcomes of economic policy. And what policies could be implemented that could change the behavior of society? There may be nudge policies and or policies that could affect behaviors related to saving and investment and fertility or childbearing issues, as well as society's expectations. Let me tell you some words about what nudge policies are. It is one of the most discussed and contemporary ideas on how to influence people's choices without coercing them by improving the architecture of their choices. And there are interventions that protect the freedom of choice for a society, but that also steer people in certain directions. And nudging is any aspect of the choice architecture that alters people's behavior in a predictable way without forbidding any options or significantly changing their economic incentives. Okay, I'm going, this was the presentation. I hope you find it interesting. Many thanks for watching the presentation.
Thank you very much, Professor Kostis. That was a very interesting presentation, and actually it is very close to my interests. So we'll have the time to discuss later on. Who is talking? Okay. So now we'll move towards to Professor Pierrakos. I want to welcome him Actually, Professor Pierrakos, I'm very glad you are here because the other day I was reading, I was in the committee of a student who did her diplomatic thesis for a master's, and I saw your name in the reference list, and I said, oh, it was on the health issues, and I think it also may relate to some slides that I showed previously. So a short presentation of Professor Pierrakos. He is a professor at the Department of Business Administration and Director of Social Policy Division at the Athens University of West Attica. Professor Pierrakos, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Chymis, Athanasios. I'm very glad that I'm here today with you. Your presentation was very interesting to me also. My background is coming from health sector, as you said before. We belong to the social policy sector in the business department of University of West Attica. And my expertise has to do with health policy and health management. So today we are going to present some, I think, quite interesting issue that has to do with the, sorry, let me do the presentation here, share my, okay, which has to do with the, so it has to do with the impact of the economic crisis on health indicators in Greece and a proposal for primary healthcare services. Today, my presentation is split in 8 parts, as you see. We'll start with a small introduction to literature and methodology of that approach. And then we will see the macroeconomic indicators and health indicators. And afterwards, we'll present the correlations between macroeconomic indicators and health indicators. Then we will present some things about the healthcare system in Greece. And finally, we'll draw some important conclusions that has to do with the healthcare system and the proposal concerning primary healthcare and the recommendations. So let's move to the introduction that, as it is well known, that gross domestic product correlates with the rise in unemployment and the negative impact on the unemployment. And unemployment as a direct result of economic downturn is correlated with the negative evolution of health indicators. Additionally, economic crisis has an impact on the health of society as a whole. That means that some of the indicators of health indicators is being affected by the economic crisis. Let's have a quick look in the aim of our study, which is the impact of economic crisis on key of healthcare indicators, and some suggestions on the organization of primary healthcare services. So, which are the macroeconomic indicators that we study? Is the gross domestic product, the public health expenditure, and unemployment. Correlated with, we'll see if they are correlated with the self-reported unmet needs, which is very important as a health indicator showing how the healthcare system affects to the people, and self-perceived health coming from as an indicator from workers and unemployment, and health life years. The data collection came from Eurostat, as we say, WHO, and the National Statistical Organization, and IOVM Foundation. So let's move to the macroeconomic indicators. See, here we have the gross domestic product markets in Greece, we can see that during the crisis, there is a significant drop of the gross domestic product, and afterwards, there is a slow increase, but it's very slow, as we can see. Comparing with the healthcare expenditure in Greece, we can notice that there is a similar pattern here. So we have a decrease of healthcare expenditure, and we can observe that the private out-of-pocket expenditure, which is the main observation here, is high concerning with other countries of European Union. That means that it's about 40%, 38 is the mean value, but it's about 40% in the peak of the economic crisis, which is about 5 billion euros, which is of the out-of-pocket expenditure during the crisis. Here we can notice that the people, the citizens of Greece, has to pay for private health services during the crisis, which is, I think that is a very strong observation here. Another macroeconomic indicator, of course, is the unemployment. It reaches the highest point during the crisis 2013, which is over 1 million unemployed people. And then we can, which is the peak of crisis, let's say, but afterwards there is a decreasing of the unemployment, but we can say that it's not dramatically decrease of unemployment. So, as for the self-reported unmet needs, that means that the people do not going to do medical examination or treatment concerning the primary health care. We can notice that there is a steady degree increase during the economic crisis, starting from 2010, and as we can see that there is more significant rise after 2013. As we can notice, it's the year that we have the peak of unemployment, which is a steady rise after 2013 to 2016. That means that a lot of people are excluded from the healthcare services, and there is a need to pay by themselves or not to achieve or access the healthcare services. We can say that is a main public health problem concerning with the future of healthcare services demand and of course the cost of healthcare expenditures. Here we can notice that the low income has this is the that figure has to do with the income quantile from 2008 to 2016, and here we have the first quantile, who is the lower income, to the fifth quantile, who is the higher income. We can see that approximately we have about over 100% of increasing of unmet needs for medical examination or treatment. As for the self-perceived as very good and good health, in that figure we can see that there is a decreasing of self-perceived as very good for people that are not unemployed, who are the employed persons. We can notice here that the people who are employed feel about their health as not excellent, not very good. That happens because the people lose their income, and they feel that the social conditions are not very supportive to their family or to themselves, even they are employed. And as for unemployment, we can see that unemployed people have, again, the tension is coming to drop. I think that quite important here figure has to do with the healthy life years, the expected healthy life years. That means that we can see that there is a drop for a decrease, actually, for healthy life years for women, and again, healthy life, lower healthy life years for men. Comparing with 2007 to 2016. It's as we can see that that means that the healthy life years are lower during the crisis and economic crisis that affect on the health indicators. Here is the correlation and the coefficient macroeconomic and health indicators. We have the healthy life years for female and female, life expectancy at birth, deaths, and self-reported unmet needs for medical care and self-perceived health as very good and good. Which are the conclusions on that? First of all, we have the GDP per capita and public health expenditure and out-of-pocket expenses were correlated with healthy life years. Healthy perceived health as very good and self-reported unmet health and care needs. That means that if there is a drop of a decrease of GDP and increase of public health expenditures, that means that, which is very important, that we have a rise of self-reported unmet needs for health. So that means that rising unemployment appears to have a significant effect on health and quality of life. So what happened with the health care system? Is the healthcare system that can support that difficult situation, can support the society and people? First of all, we can see some, let's say, weaknesses of the healthcare system. First of all, it's hospital-oriented. We noticed that during that situation and crisis, that the people, if they ask for healthcare services, they have to go to the hospital. So there is a lack of interface between primary and hospital care, which is very serious problem in the healthcare system. Promotes primary healthcare as a passive gatekeeping of hospital services. So it works mostly in order to not help people or to prohibit the access of people to the hospital care. Which is not the orientation of primary health care. The perception of primary health care as non-active in protecting of the population, because that means that there is a lack of health education programs, especially of individual health education program, information program for the people, and concerning that to their needs, to their healthcare needs. On the other hand, there is a lack of national safety and quality health services standard that is burden the healthcare system. So the people asking all the time for hospital and services inside the hospital. Of course, there is a lack of staff oriented in primary healthcare. That is the main problem here in Greece. So that means that we have less family doctors and district community nurses comparing with other European countries. So is this any proportion on that? We propose a prevention and supporting monitoring network that so concerning with local health teams. That means that there is a need in order to organize a primary healthcare network with a care coordinator in order to assess the needs of and health status of the people, and coordinate a healthcare team to the health education, information, knowledge management, counseling, and psychological and empowerment people in the local community. Although that data has to record on the electronic health records, and that will be utilized by the policy of the Ministry of Health Ministry in order to organize. Nowadays, we are asking for a policy concerning the coronavirus, and there is a lack of epidemiological data coming from primary health care. Furthermore, we have the support of patients. That is very important in order to avoid the lack of interface between primary and secondary health care. So there is a need to support patients by specific diagnostic categories that are cases of high incidence, high cost, and high risk. So there is a need to change of the orientation of hospital, not to be as a primary healthcare center or supporting outpatient clinics, but has to change its orientation to offer services only for high incidence and high cost and high risk. Of course, in order to succeed that aim, there is a need for a very well organized local health team and local health services center in order to increase the communication between primary and secondary health care. So the observation of care in collaboration with the host team at the hospital is a very important issue here in order to increase the communication between primary and secondary care and increase and help people in order to go from primary to the secondary care without any obstacles.
2 minutes, George.
Okay, I'm going to finish in 2 minutes. So the conclusion here are economic crisis increases the burden of healthcare. Our findings confirm that, and we can say that the health networks in primary healthcare addresses the healthcare needs of population, improving access for healthcare services. Some of the recommendation, as we said before, is that the healthcare system in Greece needs to be more patient-centric, providing services in the local community, improving home care services, emphasis on creating primary healthcare networks, and of course, electronic health record is an essential tool in the healthcare network and helping in order to record all the epidemiological data for people and for policy utilized for the policy making. Thank you very much for your attention. I will be available afterwards for any questions.
Professor Pierrakos, thank you very much for your informative and very interesting presentation. I have already some questions, but I will wait later on. Now we welcome Vasilis Petkidis, and I'm very happy to welcome a practitioner. We always seek the opinion of a practitioner because academicians oftentimes we are focused on the theory, but we want the opinion of somebody who gets his hands dirty, as Ronald Coase used to urge young economists to do, to get their hands dirty and not conduct armchair economics. So Mr. Petkidis is the CEO of currently of the Centacor Jet Oil. He was a member of several boards, but he has also degrees, an undergraduate degree from the University of Florida, the Florida State University, excuse me, on management. And he has also a master's degree on accounting and financial management from the University of Lancaster. Without further delay, Mr. Petkidis, I welcome you on board.
Kalimera, Athena, all over the world. Thank you very much for having us here today. Let me just share the screen for the presentation. Can you see the screen? I hope you can see the screen now.
Yes, it's visible.
Okay, great. First of all, I would like to say that I'm very humbled to be among so many distinguished scholars. And on behalf of Webster University and myself, congratulations. This effort deserves an extra commendations due to all the obstacles which needed to be overcome. Now, because the time is very limited for such an extensive subject, I will try to provide the feeling of what some of our ancient philosophers and philosophies and the philosophies which affected the Athenian economy. And then I will refer to what are some of the measures which are in line with these philosophies of the past, which will hopefully take the Athenian economy to a more prosperous future. So classical philosophers such as Xenophon, Plato, and Aristotle were more interested in how people should behave, which is what separates economics today and economics in ancient Greece. Both Plato and Aristotle promoted a small, self-sufficient economy and disapproved of greedy profit-taking in reaction to the flourishing market economy in the 4th century Athens. They were more concerned with justice than market equilibrium. They found value in what is good rather than what is conducive to pleasure in order to bring this conducive to pleasure. In order to bring this presentation, I have not gone into many of the sources of information available, and I have tried to extract some of the main thoughts of Plato and Aristotle and their ethical theories. So to provide a complete depth and understanding of how these philosophies impacted the Athenian and world economy, it would not be possible to do in 20 minutes, so please be lenient with me. Ancient Greek society took precedence over the individual. Their conception was that the individual was dependent upon the society in which he was born, and the community molded the individual into a civilized human being. Society took precedence or priority over the individual. The individual was born, lived, and died, whereas society is forever. The more modern conception of man as free, autonomous agent who chooses his own ends, selects his own means to attain his desired ends, and in general lives for himself, was an alien notion to the mind of ancient Greeks. One of the leading defenders of liberty in the early 19th century Europe was the French social philosopher Benjamin Constant. In 1819, he delivered a famous lecture in Paris entitled "The Liberty of Ancients Compared with That of the Moderns." He said that among the ancient Greeks, such as in the city-states of Athens, freedom was understood to mean the right of a free citizen to participate in the political deliberations of city affairs, including speaking, debating, and voting. But once the deliberations were over and a vote was taken, the individual was a slave to the majority decisions of his fellow citizens. Modern economics considers only how people do behave and not how people should behave in economic activities involving production, consumption, and distribution. Modern economics has tried to acquire the status of science by excluding the ethical aspect of human behavior. Consequently, it has led to believe that maximization of profit and maximization of utility, hypotheses adopted to explain human behavior, were a good thing. Hosman and McPherson mentioned that because economists hypothesize that men constantly pursue selfish motives, people who study economics tend to become egoistic. On the other hand, Xenophon, Plato, and Aristotle discussed much about the broad sense of economics. For them, economics was part of ethics. One of Xenophon's works is called Economikos. It is an adjective meaning experienced in the art of household management. Hence, it may be translated as a treatise on the subject in the beginning, In the beginning of the work, Socrates argues that household management is a science or art like medicine or carpentry. This work has two parts. In the first part, Xenophon develops an original theory of values through the mouth of Socrates. Goods have use values and exchange values. For example, a flute does not have any use value to a person who does not play the flute, but because it can be exchanged for money at the market, it has an exchange value. If the person misused the money he obtained at the market, however, it would become worthless. Thus, Socrates calls wealth or property, Ktisis. Here it's more like the good agathos, rather than the material wealth as considered by modern economists. That is why Socrates includes knowledge and friends in a list of persons' wealth. The definition of property, ktisis, is useful for life, vios, and Finley writes in Xenophon, however, this is not one sentence that expresses an economic principle or offers any economic analysis. Nothing on efficiency of production, rationale, choice, the marketing of crops. In the passage mentioned earlier, however, Xenophon shows an understanding of value much more profound than what one can learn from a college course or the principles of economics. Even in terms of more mundane economic analysis, Xenophon demonstrated his familiarity with it in the work called Ways and Means. In the second part, Xenophon discusses farm management in general. Xenophon highly valued a wife's contribution to the household economy. We could say that Xenophon was more progressive than the average intellectual of the time. Ways and Means, this work called Pori, Ways in Greek, was written in 355 BC, the year in which the social war ended and the Second Athenian League was dissolved. It suggests various measures to strengthen the Athenian economy and procure revenues for the state. It is important to understand that Greek society and that ancient Greek economy was based on slave labor, which resulted in two outcomes. First, anything involving manual labor and the common working for a living, as well as the day-to-day dealing in money and the exchanging of goods and services, was considered beneath a cultured and free citizen of a Greek city-state. It distracted the Greek citizen from his first and highest duty, participation and interest in the political, philosophical, and artistic affairs of his city-state. This did not make for an intellectual climate conducive to making questions of economic relationships and institutions a respectable field for serious reflection and thought. Second, the use of slave labor diminished any motives or incentives on the part of the thinking, free citizen to concern himself with questions of how to economize and more efficiently use labor. Since once captured and sold into slavery, slaves could not refuse to work or demand higher wages or better work conditions or search out better employment opportunities. There was little motive for developing ways to more effectively
evaluation, PhD students for scholarships.
I'm sorry. Okay, I apologize. I thought there was I heard the question. We're looking here at, since we're talking about slaves, and slaves could not refuse to work or demand higher wages or better working conditions or search out better employment opportunities. There was little motive for developing ways to more effectively employ labor through better social or market arrangements. So let's look at Plato now to have another feeling. Plato was born in 427 BC. And he was 28 when Socrates died. Plato was one of Socrates' pupils and was greatly influenced by him. Plato's work, which we will reference, are the Republic and Laws. In these writings, Socrates engages in conversations with real people, both known and unknown, including famous sophists like Gorgias and Protagoras. Socrates interrogates his opponents in the method called elenchos, cross-examination. And he claims he does not know anything, and the only thing he knows is the fact that he does not know anything. In this regard, he is the wisest of all. Socrates' idea of education was not instilling knowledge into the minds of students or making them think for themselves by asking questions such as, what is courage, what is piety, what is virtue, what is pleasure, and what is justice? Socrates is only interested in people and not in stars, only in ethics and not in metaphysics. His primary concern is the question, how should a man live? In the early dialogues, Plato presents his arguments in the same way Socrates did, namely through dialogues rather than through lectures. The fundamental characteristics of Plato's ethics are that goodness is a function of the soul in terms of aim and character, and it's not a function of the act in terms of its consequence, and pleasure and goodness are distinct, and a man should seek only goodness. Obviously, here pleasure is not restricted to physical pleasure. Aristotle more or less subscribes to the same two principles as well. For Plato, and the origin of society is found in the inability of men to be self-sufficient. They lack the ability to serve all their own needs through their own labor. Each man possesses certain inherent qualities that make him better at some things than at others. By and through specialization of tasks, the members of a community can improve their material conditions by producing that commodity at which they are most skilled and trade quantities of it for other things that they need from others who are doing the same. Man's primary wants, Plato said, was for food, shelter, and clothing. The city-state must have an internal division of labor large enough to contain sufficient number of members with the diverse skills and abilities to assure that such basic wants could be satisfied. Plato admits that if the city-state is to satisfy both the necessities of men and the higher and more cultured aspects of their potential lives, the city had to expand to a size large enough to include the required population, land, and resources to fill their higher and more cultured wants as well. Other city-states would be in the same situation. Conflicts between city-states would arise. Each would attempt to take from each other city-state what they possessed. To defend itself from competing city-states and to expand to have the requisite population, land, and resources for this higher cultured life, any city-state would need a class of men in the division of labor, trained, skilled to protect and conquer territory, resources, and slaves to perform the work to be done. Well, this is the beginning of military spending. For Plato, there exists a hierarchy of values: the soul, the body, and wealth, in that order. A guardian class with the right to own property would be tempted, therefore, to pursue the lowest rather than the highest of the ends of man, the pursuit of material wealth rather than the quest for truth and virtue. Consequently, Plato has the guardians renounce material ownership. Plato's assumption is that social environment, the political and economic institutions in which men live and work, determines their behavioral characteristics. Change the social and economic institutions, in this case, from private property to communal ownership and sharing, and you can change people from self-interested beings into other-oriented beings. If you deny people the ability and the right to acquire and possession, and to have possession of private property and wealth, they will stop being concerned with their own personal interests and desires. Instead, they will only concern themselves and have as their goal the betterment of all who share in a common or communal property and community. Plato said a state is more important than an individual. By this statement, he was not promoting a totalitarian philosophy. He's simply saying that all individuals that comprise a state are more important than a single individual, or as Aristotle said, the sum of the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. We should not forget the fact that for Plato, the purpose of a nation is to let its citizens live the most comfortable and unrestrained lives. Through education, Plato hoped to attain the willing cooperation of citizens in observing the laws. Thus, it was important to educate the citizens so that they will voluntarily follow the laws. One of Plato's principles is that the hierarchy of values should be soul, body, wealth in this order. For Plato, it was not sufficient to produce purely habitual and mindless obedience to the norms of the community. Although, as Aristotle also recognized, habit is an indispensable starting point of socialization. It must be supplemented through that understanding of right and wrong that can alone provide the basis for capacity for judgment, is essential for virtue. Now, Aristotle, who was born in 384 BC in Chalkidiki, northeastern Greece, his father was a court physician of the Macedonian king Amindas, father of Philip and grandfather of Alexander. And Aristotle went to Athens when he was 17 years old and became a student at Plato's academy. He lived in Athens as a metic, resident alien, until Plato's death in 348 BC. Afterward, he did research in biology in Asia Minor, taught young Alexander in a school he built in Macedonia, and then came back to Athens in 335 to open a school in the Lyceum, Lykion in Greek. And his school in Athens was called the Petrakis because he taught while walking in the colonnade of the Lyceum. He was expelled from Athens in 323 and died in Chalkida Evia in 322. He believed that the excellence of character, areti, refers to the state of soul that can be achieved after long practice and training, where one behaves in a good way willingly. Just doing good things is not enough. One must do them willingly and enjoy doing them. There are three aspects to character: desire, choice, and action. The man with his excellent character must be good in all three aspects. He feels good desires, chooses a good act after deliberation. Desires here include not only bodily desires, but also rational wishes. While he hopes that wise policies may help to improve the conditions and the actions of men, Aristotle recognizes that man possesses a human nature that cannot be molded or bent or transformed to conform some ideal of a perfect state populated by transformed people in the way that Plato believed, which is a principle which Plato believed was in principle desirable and possible. Aristotle saw property rights as an incentive mechanism. When individuals believe and feel certain that they will be permitted to keep the fruits of their own labor, they will have an inclination to apply themselves in various productive ways, which would not be the case with common or collective ownership. Break this connection between work and reward, and you weaken the productive impulse and plant instead the seeds of envy and anger among men concerning the distribution of what they have been made to produce in common. Aristotle, on the character of man within society, defended private ownership of property. He did not place the individual at the center of social concerns. Aristotle referred to man as a political animal. In his view, there was no life for a man outside the city-state into which he was born, neither a physical nor a moral existence independent of the community and the state. Man is born into and lives his life as a citizen of the state, and as such, he was subject to being regulated in various aspects of his life by the laws and customs of city-state in which he is an inseparable part. Like his teacher, Plato, Aristotle was concerned with asking, what is the good? What is life? What life is best and proper for man? The highest ideal in Aristotle's view is the life of the philosopher. The next best life is that of the perfect moral virtue, and as manifested in the interests and conduct of the individual as a participant in the life of the city-state. But the chief aim of man, Aristotle argued, is not the production of products or even works of art, but rather the actions themselves. Man's conduct and action was an end itself, not the specific concrete result of action. What Aristotle is arguing may be captured in the phrase, it is not whether you win or lose, but how you played the game. That is, has the individual acted with honesty and integrity?
2 minutes.
I'm sorry?
2 minutes more.
2 minutes more.
I know we have the break, but we
Yes.
should try to keep it short.
I will try to move as fast
Thank you.
to shorten up. In order to summarize, because unfortunately there's a lot of things that we need to discuss further about their philosophies to understand what motivated the Athenian economy, we would need a lot more time. But I will move forward and discussed and just explained two things. The Athenian economy was based not, like the philosopher says, not on the individual, but on society and the longevity of society. So moving forward, we have to understand in Greece what ancient Greece taught us and what we're doing now to move forward. So the Greek crisis, according to the Bank of Greece, has taken a heavy toll on output, income, and wealth. Between 2008 and 2016, Greece lost over 1/4 of its GDP at constant prices, and the employment rate rose by nearly 16% points. Furthermore, GDP per capita purchasing power declined 67.4%. Based on the philosophies of Aristotle and Plato, the most devastating hit was a large brain drain. Greece faces major challenges: the still negative current account balance and the negative net international investment position, slow digital transformation, and the projected demographic decline. And Greece's future, in taking into consideration the previous items, has to look at how it's going to move forward. And how it's going to move forward, the Bank of Greece has proposed several actions, which I will mention a few, which are in line with some of our philosophers' ideas and beliefs. Society over the individual, higher education, not only in the areas of science, but also in the area of morality and ethics, proper incentives to motivate human nature, and the understanding that sum of the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. The economic policies, according to the Bank of Greece, should focus on the following: broadening the scope for public-private cooperation in line with best international practices, for example, by strengthening public-private partnerships in investment, social security, and healthcare. Improving the effectiveness of public administration and the efficiency of state-owned enterprises. Stepping up the pace of privatization programs and improving the management of state assets. Maintaining labor market flexibility and pursuing structural reforms in the goods and services markets in order to boost competition and increase innovation and productivity growth. Improving the quality and safeguarding the independence of public institutions. Independent and well-functioning institutions enhance long-term economic growth. In this context, the speedier delivery of justice, legal certainty, and a clear, stable legal framework are essential conditions for strengthening the public sense of fairness and justice, for improving the investment climate, and for accelerating economic growth. Enhancing the so-called knowledge triangle, education, research, and innovation, as well as the digitalization of the economy by adopting policies and reforms that support research, technology, diffusion, entrepreneurship, and foster closer ties between businesses, research centers, and universities. This would contribute to further increasing R&D spending and the ICT sector's share in GDP. However, exploitation of ICT calls for continuous development and training in new technologies, the adoption of innovative products, and enhancement of startups and startup entrepreneurship. Overall, sustained efforts are required to foster innovation, R&D spending in order to boost Greece's digital transformation. And one last item, which our philosophers might have included here, if they were running the Bank of Greece, would be create incentives which would help reverse the country's brain drain. I tried to be as brief as possible, and I hope the message got across that society and the future of the economy depends on looking at the whole and not looking at the individual. Thank you very much.
Mr. Petkidis, thank you very much for your very thoughtful presentation. Actually, I gave you some more minutes, extra minutes than the rest of us, because, as I said, you are a practitioner, and we, the academicians, always appreciate the opinion of a practitioner.
I apologize for running a little bit. Actually, I tried to reduce this presentation from about an hour and a half to 20 minutes was pretty challenging.
Thank you very much. We'll have the opportunity to discuss at the question and answers session. It's always nice to try to put things into perspective and try to combine and see how modern economics and modern sciences evolved from the antiquity. So again, thank you, and I thank everyone. Now we'll go for a 20 minutes break. Well, not 20, 15 actually. We'll be back at 10:55 with the very interesting lecture by Professor Bourantas. So let's take the break and see you in 15 minutes. Thank you. We are honored to have with us Professor Bourantas. What can we say about him? He's well known. He delivers speeches, more than 60 speeches every year on management issues and leadership. So he's a professor of management, director of the graduate program in business administration for executive, and the master's degree in human resources management of the Athens University of Economics and Business. Today, he's going to talk about the Captivator leader, leading creatively by Ethos, Pathos, and Logos. So we are eager to listen to you, Professor, and the microphone is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Captivating leadership is a concept that we propose for the first time here. And on the best of our knowledge, nothing similar has been written so far. But as they say, good things when short are twice as good. Let's start right away with giving you the rationale behind the development of the concept, and we will follow with the analysis of the comprising components of the concept. First thing first, we need to understand the definition of captivator leader. During our research for this work, we came across the notion of captivator leader just once in a white paper of well-known and respected consulting and leadership training firm, the DDI. In this paper, captivator leader is the one who builds up established foundation of trust to instill people with feeling of excitement and belonging, transfer the energy to their message in such a compelling way that people take ownership of strategy or vision and are empowered to carry it out. Briefly, for DDI, captivating leadership is about passion, commitment, and empowerment. Another interesting point that can help us better understand the concept is the fact that organizations and managers, for the matter, can buy the physical presence of people for a certain period of time within a particular setting and for a minimum of somatic and mental tasks. What they cannot buy, though, is the enthusiasm, inspiration, passion, heart, soul, and mind of those people. Not because they can't afford them, because they cannot be bought, but only earned. And this is the outcome of successful leadership and what is more of captivating leadership. Before we continue, let's pause for a moment and do a thought experiment. We believe that it will help you grasp the concept much better than us merely presenting it to you, no matter how well we might do it. So try to remember those people in your life, be it supervisor, friends, teacher, parents, or any other person that had you enchanted and charmed, and answer the following question. First, what are you feelings and emotions during your interaction with them? How did you perceive them? What was their influence on your thinking, values, energy, choices, and behaviors? So, have you felt delight, enthusiasm, pleasantness, or highly energetic, excited, enhanced, or influenced? Were your perception of that person anything close to being interesting, inspiring, exciting, charming, attractive, trustworthy, benevolent, pleasant, enchanting, or fascinating? Did they catch your attention and inspire you to become more creative and make you think differently, more critically and radically? If yes, then you are in the accordance with the highly respected vocabularies that define the term captivator. Thus, based on the above ideas and taking into consideration the vast number of leader definitions that be found in the relevant literature, we define captivator leader as follows. Captivator leader is a leader who, by exercising positive and creative influence on the mind, heart, and soul of the people around them, affects them emotionally, intellectually, and makes them wanting to behave and act rightly. Through this influential process, people expand their possibilities or potential and give their best selves, both individually and collectively, for extraordinary achievements and a better future. And when people perform at the best of their abilities and draw on universal values, and they can achieve extraordinary results, changes are more feasible and acceptable, and there are greater chances that the life of both leaders and followers will become more meaningful and fulfilling. Also, in line with Aristotelian thinking, personal eudaimonia, euphoria, and happiness will be gradually associated with collective happiness, and people will want to work and strive for the common good according to Aristotle, which refers to policies, decision, and action that are beneficial for most of all members of a given community of society. Now, let us elaborate a bit more on the defining characteristics of this type of leader. Captivator leaders strive for the euphoria, eudaimonia, and happiness of their followers. The concept of captivation is more extended and inclusive than the motivation, commitment, empowerment, and engagement. Captivator leaders emerge across all hierarchical levels and all types of collective entities, such as organizations, classrooms, families, and societies. What the captivator leader passes on is better than what was found. Better people, institutions, organizations, and so on. Their legacy matters because it is connected with people. The final test of such leader is whether the people that stay behind have the conviction and will to carry on. The captivator leader does not employ improper ways to influence others. They are not demagogues, populists, charlatans, or hegemonic. Captivator leader excel influence through their decisions, roles, and behaviors, but mainly through captivating communication, which is based on ethos, pathos, and logos. All captivator leaders are leaders, but all leaders are not captivators. Are you getting an idea of what the captivator leader is all about? To make this clearer, we have generated several questions according to which we'll unfold the dimensions of captivating leadership model. Before posing the thought, it is important to underline that the approach we have adopted is holistic and systemic. According to holistic approaches, thinking is not simply out of the box, but instead it believes that it removes the box altogether. In this sense, with our model, we aspire that business people will find ways to develop entirely new mindsets and beliefs about their competence and their roles within them. Who is the captivated follower? What are their characteristics? In what ways are they changed after having interacted with captivating leader? Captivated followers constitute a key idea in our model, since they are the ultimate goal of captivating leadership. However, and this is an important contribution, we have mentioned earlier that the raison d'etre of captivating leadership is promoting common good. Therefore, it is safe to argue that captivated followers are also the means toward the common good, since they will benefit themselves. Through these particular roles, behaviors, and attitudes of the captivated attitudes to do leaders captivate their followers in order to guide them to extraordinary performances. Which are those personality traits that need to be developed as to have a leader that captivates us? Given that the roles and behaviors can be viewed as the outcome of the important decisions that we make, then we cannot ignore the cognitive aspect of captivator leaders, such as the qualities of thinking and effective decision-making or problem-solving. How do captivating leaders communicate with their followers? Without communication, there is no influence. Without communication, there are no meaningful human relationships. How do the character and the competences of the captivator leader develop in order to practice captivating leadership effectively? To achieve a sustained organizational, some ideas about captivated people, the results, the outcome of the captivated leadership. What means captivated followers? To achieve sustained organizational effectiveness and success while being highly competitive is a process that requires efficiency and productivity, innovativeness, organizational learning, and continuous adaptation to change, exceptional customer service, and relationship. Strategy, organizational structures and processes and systems, and the technology all play a significant role to the above. But without the knowledge, abilities, and willingness of the people within the organization to perform at their best and to do the right things rightly, no one of those are possible. The human capital, which is a term that includes the intellectual, emotional, and social capital, is by far the most crucial contributor of the sustained success of the modern organizations. Indeed, if you think about it, it is the people that make and implement the important or not so important decisions that determine all the other factors of success. During the last decades, we have seriously expanded our knowledge firstly on the why and further on how and what organizations and managers should do so that their people perform at their best both as individuals and as members of a team. As a result, the notion of motivation, commitment, empowerment, and lately engagement have been employed and enriched to serve this purpose. However, the challenges that leaders face nowadays have somehow moved away from the traditional supervisor-employee format. As follows, we notice a void in the development of the new ideas and practices which the contemporary leader could use in order to meet the difficult challenges of the modern business world. It is our strong belief that the concept of captivated leadership opens the road for a more holistic, integrated understanding of the leadership process, better grasps the conditions within modern organizations operate, while at the same time appreciates the new types of employees. The existing concept, namely of motivation, commitment, empowerment, engagement, share a lot of common ideas. They are interdependent and they have proven to be a particular usefulness of all types of organization and leaders. However, our experience and research both converge that all these concepts are also share two weaknesses. The first weakness relates to the fact that all concepts can be conceptualized as being the means to achieve organizational results. This conceptualization does not take into account the fact that people, when they go to work, they do not leave parts of their self at home. Instead, they are coming as well to the organization they work in, bringing their thoughts, desire, fears, emotions, etc., etc. This is extreme importance, especially nowadays, where the work shift extends way beyond the 40 hours, thus rendering the time we spend working a significant period of our life. Therefore, we believe that all ideas resulting to the well-being of people working in modern organizations, such as satisfaction, happiness, pleasantness, and meaning, should not be considered only as a means towards better organizational results, but rather as means ends of the same time. In other words, we should make this shift and start viewing well-being as a goal per se, and not as a way to increase organizational profits. The second weakness relates to the fact that no one well-being and happiness of people working in the organization. Therefore, in an attempt to get past these weaknesses, we propose the concept of captivation, aspiring to integrate and expand all the above ideas. To this end, we need to answer three fundamental questions. Firstly, what the captivated feel for the captivator? Secondly, how the captivated people perceive the captivator? And thirdly, how the captivated eventually feel and experience. So when people interact with captivator leader, they end up being inspired and influenced. It is like those interactions energize a process of transmitting positive energy from the leader to others. As a result, people feel love, admiration, affection, sympathy, and compassion for their leader. These interactions have similar effect on how people perceive their leader. We argue that the leader is perceived as being exciting, fascinating, compelling, charming, reliable, etc. Now, combining the answers to the above questions, we can see the effect of captivator leader on the emotions and thoughts of the people they interact with. So captivated people now experience all sorts of positive emotions such as inspiration, enthusiasm, joy, pride, and passion. Similar is the impact of thoughts. Captivated people are creative, they think radically, proactively, and systematically. From the above, the notion of captivation should be understood as a tool to hold the attention of people by fascinating and hunting, and also their deep involvement and interest. Notice that even from the very definition, captivation is a more holistic and generic term that includes the notion of motivation, commitment, empowerment, and engagement. To elaborate a bit more, think a leadership as a notion that is about carrying in your every person something which on some scale captivate others. The notion of captivation has been carefully selected. Strangely, one is able to captivate others with fear, but the kind of leadership we are promoting here is certainly something closer to respect. And the best kind of captivation is one based on inspiration, where followership happens because people are free to follow, because they see in you something which they want to invest in.
Professor, 2 minutes.
Okay, I'll try. The leader finds that their followers want to give their attention, but most importantly, their time. The captivated people feel all the cognitive, psychological, and institutional states of satisfaction, motivation, commitment to organization, empowerment, and engagement. Apart from those where they experience the psychological, institutional, mental states that results from inspiration, eudaimonia, and euphoria. Inspiration is the action of moving the intellect or emotion. Euphoria is a Greek word, a feeling of or state of intense excitement, happiness, and will be. As follows, captivation is not a state that results through the implementation of the right policy systems, organizational culture, nor is the outcome of leadership, vision, or values. Of course, their values not undermined, but instead they take a wall of new meaning under the way the leader communicates them. I finish. We believe that leaders, future leaders, and scholars can benefit more from a more holistic approach to leadership, and that the concept of captivator leaders points to that direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Bourantas, for your very interesting lecture. And actually, it can be combined very well with the next one. And we are honored to have with us Professor Aditya Singh, who is the director of the Athena School of Management in Mumbai. We're very glad that here is someone from an Athena school. So the Athens College Athens is here. And he has more than 15 years of experience in the corporate sector, which makes him not only an academician, but also a practitioner. And we are very eager to listen to what he has to tell us during his very interesting speech, Leadership Lessons from Indian Mythology for 21st Century. We heard previously Mr. Petkidis on ancient Greece. Now we welcome Professor Singth on the Indian mythology. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I will be sharing my screen. I hope that's all right.
Yes, of course.
Give me a second, please.
Okay, great.
Great. Are we live, the sharing? Just confirming?
Yeah. Yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Good morning to all my friends in Greece. Good afternoon to all my friends who are from Asia, and good evening to anyone who is there from the United States. It's indeed a privilege and a pleasure to be here. My full compliments to the entire team behind Athens Calls Athens, because you have been able to address the vast problem and situations which the pandemic has caused for all of us across the world, and yet you have been able to start this as an exercise and conduct this virtually. So my kudos to all of you. It's a privilege to represent both India and the Athena School of Management in this symposium and conference. Of course, when the conference itself was called Athens Calls Athens, there was no way that Athena could not participate. So it's always a privilege. And I'm going to be talking on a topic which is very close to my heart. And it has actually evolved over the past 7 months, which is inspiring leadership through and beyond COVID-19, lessons from history and mythology. To introduce myself, my name is Professor Aditya Singh. I'm a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts in London, UK. I'm also a fellow of the Royal Asiatic Society, again in London, UK. I'm also a member of the Chatham House, which is the Royal Institute for International Affairs in UK. I'm also a member of the OECD Forum Network in Paris. And of course, I'm a director at the Athena School of Management. Friends, how much the world has changed in the past 7 months. The world is in a global crisis. There is no question or doubt about that. Millions are infected. Education and healthcare infrastructure is stretched to the maximum. Global travel is not happening. The economy is in a free fall. But all of this, though unique, is not the first time that it is happening. In many a way, history is repeating itself. Some of us may remember that exactly 100 years ago, we had a problem called what is now known as the Spanish influenza or the Spanish flu, which spread across the world and killed millions. More than 700 years ago, Western Europe and Central Europe had something called the Black Death, the plague epidemic, which killed a quarter of Europe's population 700 years ago. So this makes one think about the ancient Indian philosophies of Hinduism and Buddhism, which talks about the cyclicalness and the fluidness of time, events, and history, what we call karma and nirvana. And perhaps I can paraphrase that into one phrase, which is all of this has happened before and all of this will happen again. It is in this context that I propose and say that leadership and inspirational leadership itself constantly evolves and re-evolves given the time and the situation and the period. We have to be very clear. A person who is an inspiring leader in his time and age may not be an inspiring leader in the modern age, and vice versa. But certain fundamentals, certain core tenets do not change. They may evolve, but the core tenets may remain the same. So while leadership is a fluid concept, core tenets will remain the same, but of course some facets do change at the same time. Leadership at its very core is both a cause and an effect of the situation, perceptions, people, and the time when it is being done. But at its very core, it is a function of those who are leading and the people who are being led. It is a function of people, and people dynamics is perhaps the most interesting dynamic which is there in modern society. Leadership itself, of course, if we see history and mythology, is divided into very different types of leaderships and leaders. All of them are inspiring, but some appeal to some people and others to others. Let's take an example. Quite like in ancient Greece, you have the Iliad and the Odyssey. In India, we have the ancient Indian epics of the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. And if you see in them, the protagonist in each of these epics is very different. So perhaps if you had Homer's Iliad, you of course had Achilles, who was there as one of the protagonists. But of course, if you see the Odyssey, it was Odysseus who was the protagonist, and very different types of leaderships. The same was seen in the ancient Indian epics. The hero of the Ramayana is Lord Ram, someone who one may call an alpha male, always truthful, honorable, a warrior king who faces hardship straight on and makes sure he defeats and vanquishes his enemy in mortal combat on the fields of battle. One of the main protagonists of the Mahabharata, the other great Indian epic, is Lord Krishna. Now, Lord Krishna doesn't fight physically, although he has the capabilities. He fights with his brains. He strategizes. He leads by making other people pawns on his chessboard. His discourse is in fact the basis of what the Hindus call the most holiest book of all, which is the Bhagavad Gita, equal to the Bible for what the Christians have. And all of it is part of the Mahabharata. If we come a bit more closer, Let's look at the Second World War. You had one set of leaders who were hard-charging, who were charismatic, who led from the front. Someone, for example, like an Erwin Rommel or a Patton. And on the other side, you also had leaders who strategized, who led men, not right from the front line, but led divisions, led corps, led armies, and made other people take strategic decisions. People such as Eisenhower, like Omar Bradley, like Hugh Dowding. Now, which type is more important? I think that is a question which can never be answered because both are important. What is important is the situation. If you wanted to win a battle, perhaps you would go with a Patton. If you wanted to win a war, you definitely choose an Eisenhower. Friends, while this pandemic is somewhere similar to what has happened before, it is also completely different in other ways. The biggest difference is modern technology, how the times have changed. In today's world, we may be socially distant, but virtually we are far more closer. The biggest example of this is what is happening today. Speakers from across the world speaking to an audience based mainly out of Greece, online, completely, virtually through Zoom, all right, in a language which is English. That is the globalized and modernly virtual global world for you. Everyone is facing problems. Everyone is supposed to be at home. Words the social distancing, lockdowns have become commonplace in our language, and yet we are being able to fight it, change it. People always say, in the past 6 months, the world is changing. I humbly disagree. The world isn't changing. It has already changed. And with that, what has changed is the concept of leadership. The what of leadership is not important anymore. It does not matter where you're going and what you want to achieve. More important than that is the how. What is the journey? And why is that important? Because nobody can predict the future anymore. You ask the best futurists in the world to predict what's going to happen in the next 1 year, 2 year, the decade, and they actually cannot. So leadership itself has become a journey, a great enabler. If I go back to the Indian epic of Ramayana, one of the essential parts of that is the great exile of Lord Ram, when his father, his own father, sends him for a 14-year-long exile to the thick forests of India. Ram goes for that. He's accompanied by his loyal brother, Lakshman, and his wife, Sita. And it is in that journey of 14 years, you see the change from a prince of the kingdom of Ayodhya to a god, to a lord, to a leader of civilization. So perhaps if the journey wasn't there, the destination would not matter at all. And that's something which we have to remember. Perhaps very similar to what we have in the Odyssey, where you have the adventures of Odysseus and his companions, or even the labors of Heracles, or how we call it in English now, Hercules, the 12 tasks of Heracles. So it is a lot about the journey. And all that ancient wisdom which you taught about the journey being more important than the destination, that's again come back to be true now. As I said, all of this has happened again before, and all of this will happen again. History itself is unfortunately or fortunately cyclic in nature. So what are the facets of modern inspirational leadership? I count 4. The first and the most important in today's world is resilience. For the past 30 or 40 years, we only came across a term called performance leadership. The end justifieth the means. Go forward, deliver results at the cost of everything else. Look what's happened to that in the past 6 months. Performance leadership is passé. You cannot optimize performance at the cost of everything else. What is important now and what everyone else talks about is resilient leadership. The ability, what is resilience all about? Is the ability not only to throw a punch, but to get a punch, to receive a knockout blow, fall on the floor of the ring, and the ability to get up again and stay the course. Leaders before and now are people who can weather adversity and stay the course and make sure that they can succeed. I have a request to the host, however, when there are 5 minutes left, please give me an alert so I know I only have 5 minutes left. Thank you so much. Otherwise, I can keep speaking.
Oh, it's okay.
Example
You
again.
have more than 7 minutes, actually. 8.
No worries, just give me a hint when I have 3 or 4 minutes. That's my only request. If you see from the ancient text of Mahabharata, Lord Arjun, one of the great warriors in the side of good, came to a battle called the Mahabharata. The Mahabharata actually is the battle, the great war, where he faced off against his own cousins. And he laid down his bow and arrow and said, how can I kill my own cousins? He had a dilemma. It was at that time that Lord Krishna, the hero of the Mahabharata, sat down to him, gave him wisdom day and night, told him what is dharma, that is the right action, and what are the effects of karma and nirvana. And in the end, that made Arjun become decisive enough to pick up his bow and arrow and go forth again to fight and yes, kill and also, however, win the battle. Friends, in today's world, in resilient leadership, it can only work if you're decisive. Not doing anything is not an option anymore. The second major point is agility. You have to be agile. You have to be ready to say, okay, I made a wrong decision. I can course correct and move ahead. Because remember, nobody knows the waters that we are charting right now. The biggest example, of course, is a great Greek hero of ancient Hellenic times, which is Alexander the Great. One of the greatest, battles, and why Alexander is respected even in India. In fact, in India, we call him Sikandar, is of the great battle he fought on the battle of Indus against the great Indian king of Porus. Alexander, under normal circumstances, should have lost the battle because he had war elephants facing him. But because of his agility of mind, because of his tactics, he did things which made sure he won that battle. And that's what leadership is all about. To paraphrase the great man Muhammad Ali, the boxer, you got to fly like a butterfly, you got to sting like a bee. That's the only way you can be a resilient leader in today's world. If there was ever a time to be empathetic and emotionally intelligent, it is now. There's turmoil everywhere and with everyone, with our friends, with our family, with our colleagues, and it's at home, it is at office. For Christ's sake, there is nothing called an office anymore, right? We're all working from home. In such a situation, leaders have to be able to not only hear the colleagues, they have to listen to them. They have to understand them. And they have to be able to show empathy. Again, if I go back to ancient Indian mythology, the most empathic and emotionally intelligent person we had was Lord Krishna. As I said, he led by being emotionally intelligent, by making people feel that he actually believed in them, which probably he did. And that makes me tell you, it's not only important that you listen and you understand. Perception is critical. People have to perceive you to be emotionally intelligent. That is very, very important in today's world. Remember, it is a diffused world. Command and control is gone. People are in their own bubbles. We as leaders have to be able to reach out to them. The next part is cultural intelligence. Social distancing versus virtual proximity. Socially, we're all distant, but yes, look at us today. Virtually, we are so close. And leaders, especially those inspirational leaders, have to manage the dichotomy of managing for today with the crisis and yet planning and managing for tomorrow. Sometimes they can be at cross functions, but then that's where leaders come in and take effective decisions to make sure the results happen. So maintaining a balance between short-term, mid-term, and long-term becomes critical. In today's world, diversity and equity are so important. Diversity is important because in the end, that is the only thing that leads to innovation. If you're not diverse, how will you innovate? You have to be diverse to innovate. Equity and not equality is important. It is not important to give everyone the same chance. It is important to give everyone the same chance from where they started. That's sometimes some things which get lost in translation, but it's important. Remember, now more than ever, with the world in the throes of a crisis, we have to come together as a people, as a nation, as a world if we want to move forward. Most important is empowerment. Empowerment of gender, empowerment of the underprivileged, empowerment of people who previously had no power decision making. And when you empower people, you as a leader get empowered. People always think it's always about empowering people who are working for you or with you. No, it's about empowering yourself. True empowerment is in its finest form true leadership. You know, one of the greatest philosophers and advisors in ancient India was a person called Chanakya or Kautilya. And he wrote this treatise called Arthashastra. And in that, he wrote very, very clearly that the ultimate source of prosperity of the kingdom, which we can also read as a country, is its security and the prosperity of its people. In our organizations, you as a CEO perhaps are the king. But remember, the kingdom is the company of the organization, and the people are your colleagues and employees. You have to ensure they're all empowered for success. The final part is, of course, communication. And communication is critical in today's world. The old model of command and control, traditional top-down models are over. It is all about diffused working. All of us are working from home, and hence leadership is also diffused. Communication is about collaboration. The world is becoming more agile. The economy is moving to a gig economy. People are becoming more accountable for their own results. Frankly speaking, in the next decade, you will see a lot of levels of managerial and of supervisory levels being thrown out of the window because obviously they don't need it. I am more accountable for my work and I report directly to the CEO of the company. In this case, collaboration becomes very important and communication becomes that web which keeps everyone together. So as a leader, you have to communicate rapidly, you have to communicate constantly, you have to communicate frequently, and most important, you have to communicate contextually. And it's a two-way street, my friends. Feedback is critical. Feedback from the people you're talking to. Communication is always about giving opinion, but more importantly, receiving opinion and ideas. Without that, doesn't work. The biggest example, of course, of communication is ancient Rome, where you had Julius Gaius Caesar communicating directly with the people, the plebes. Why? Because the Senate itself was corrupt. He crossed the Rubicon and the people of ancient Rome embraced him for that. And it's one of his successors, Mark Antony again, that great speech of him, which is oft quoted to all us from the great play of Caesar by Julius Shakespeare, was the thing which made sure that even though Brutus gave a brilliant speech before him, it was Mark Antony's speech which is remembered for history, and that made the people support him and of course Augustus to make sure that revenge is taken on the killers of Caesar, and modern Western society, as we know, evolved from that. In summary, has the game changed or just have the rules changed? 2 minutes, sir. All right. I would say the game has remained the same, but the rules have changed. I'm from India and we're passionate about a game called cricket. Cricket in its purest form is played over 5 days. That's a long time. It then evolved into what we call a one-day international, where it was played over 1 day. Now it is played over 4 to 5 hours. Similar way, leadership has evolved. The core of leadership has evolved, but its tenets are the same. The one thing I will tell you is the time to be reactive is over. You have to be proactive instead of being reactive if you really want to make sure that you can lead. So in order to be thriving and through and beyond COVID-19, a leader needs to be inspiring. That is, inspiring leaders who need to be able to emerge as resilient, decisive, agile, empathetic, and culturally intelligent communicators. That is critical. 3 questions for you, and that's what I leave you with. What is leadership for you? Who is a leader for you? The second, does leadership equal perfection? And the third, why do we create heroes? Remember, perfection can never be achieved, but that doesn't stop you from trying to aspire to achieve perfection. And heroes are needed because they are the manifestations of all that we want to be, but we cannot be, but we aspire to be. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure and privilege speaking to all of you. And if there are any questions and answers, I would love to answer them given the time, of course.
Thank you very much. And I hope you will join us later at the question and answers section, so you can help us actually answer on the 3 questions that you gave us. Thank you very much. And now let's move on our last guest, who is Evangelia Sotiropoulou. She is also a practitioner. She is the founder of Inosporos, an award-winning company of beauty products from grape seed oil. She is a chemist and an enologist. She has worked in wineries throughout Greece in the production of wine and research with main interest field the utilization of wine byproducts. Evangelia, we are glad to have you with us. And this is a topic actually very timely, given the rate of unemployment in Greece. So companies like yours may be a solution. So we are eager to hear your presentation. The floor is yours. Thank you.
I would like to thank the organization for the invitation. It will take just a minute to share my screen, and please confirm the visibility.
Looks fine.
Great. So in my presentation, I would like to put it in words the word of winery byproducts and how we can utilize something that in other case it would be unexploited. So we can see the word of wine by waste and how circular economy works in these terms. Let's begin with a definition. About winery byproducts. So winery byproducts is organic byproducts with high content of polyphenols, of tannins, and other organic substances. The solid winery byproducts are called marc or pomace and are made of skin from 7 to 12% of the grape, of the weight of the grape, from the pulp, which is the maximum percentage of the grape, and it is used to produce wine, from the seeds, which is our core elements, from 0 to 6% because there are varieties that have no seeds, and from the stems from 2 to 6%, as you can see from the photo here for the anatomy of a grape. In those photos, you can see the piles of the winery byproducts, the marcs, that are left unexploited during the vinification. So let's move on and see why we should utilize the winery byproducts. Apart from the many important ingredients, there are recent studies that show that winery byproducts may negatively affect the environment by presenting toxicity to crops and wetlands. So this is the negative part of the byproducts when they are left without any utilization. Other researchers focus on wastewater of wineries that were considered to be responsible for the contamination of groundwater resources. So, grape pulp and the grape marcs. The pulp can be composted and mixed with other minerals, and after that they can be used as fertilizers without any negative applications. Grape pulp can produce high added value and purity substances such as polysaccharide or produce alcohol and spirits, of course, like in Greece we have Chymis, and in other countries also different kind of spirits. Composted grape pomace can be a substrate for plants, and they can use for cultivation of mushrooms, and can be used as an alternative. Some results in the near future. Also, fermented with other microorganisms, there is extraction of tannins and polyphenols that can be used in different fields. Of course, we have to mention the production of biofuel and energy production, that is something that lately has been added. Let's move on to see some elements about grape skin and grape seeds, as you can see them from the photos. The main byproducts that are used are, first of all, the grape seed producing grapeseed oil. It is an oil that comes from the extraction, the cold extraction of the seeds, And as we move on, we can mention the properties, the beneficial properties of the grapeseed oil in different fields, like a raw food, in medicine, and also as an ingredient in cosmetic. Also from grape seeds and skins, we produce alcohol, but not only that, we produce, can be ingredients to produce bread, pasta, to meat and seafood. A lot of wineries, mostly in the US, use the grapeseed powder in order to produce in the house, in the wineries, a lot of products. They produce bread and also cookies, and they sell them in the winery apart from their wines. Also, we have to mention that from the grape skins, we produce food colorants, natural colorants. Some numbers about grape seeds. More than 77 million tons of grapes were produced worldwide. And from those grapes, more than 3 million tons of seeds.
Ms. Sotiropoulou, excuse me for the interruption.
Yes.
Your connection is has some problems, so we cannot hear you very well. So is it possible that you switch off your camera so it does not overload the program? We may hear you better that way.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, of course. Just a minute, please. Yes. I hope this is better now.
For the moment it is, yes, thank you.
Okay, great. So, more than 3 million tons of seeds are left unexploited every year in a global scale. And I have to mention that every seed can contain from 14 to 20% of grapeseed oil. So you can imagine the tons of grapeseed oil that we could have if we could utilize all these tons of seed that are left unexploited. The conventional applications of grape seeds were mostly animal feeding, the production, of course, of grapeseed oil, and natural fertilizers. And now we move on in an example, in a case study, the Valorinosporos has come an idea that came up through a business. My research in National Captivator University of Athens, in collaboration with Charokopi University of Athens, gave me the idea of utilize the grapeseed oil in order to produce some products. So I had two phases. The first one was the research, and I focused on the grapeseed oil properties. How could I utilize this as a main ingredient in cosmetics? How could I use the whole seed as a way for exfoliation, along with wine and grapeseed syrup as a nutritional ingredient? Production line with products for hair, face, and body. Why I have chosen grapeseed oil? Because it has strong antioxidant properties due to the high concentration of polyphenols that are responsible for reducing the levels of free radicals. And skin moisturizer that provide skin firmness, fighting skin problems, protects the skin from the UVA radiation, and have therapeutic appliances in hair. So these are the grape seeds where all the story begins, and the name came up from Ethos, which in Greek means wine, and sporos, which is the seeds. So it's the plant seeds, the seeds of every idea that can become knowledge, and after that reality. And in a metaphorical point of view, the seeds are the initial element from which something describes the genesis, the new beginning, and the hope that we all need. An example of circular economy was found in March 2018, and it is still a baby, but we have accomplished to gain some award.
Apparently there is some connection problem. I don't know what the committee, if they are aware of that and if they are trying to solve the problem. There was a connection issue with Mrs. Sotiropoulou. Unfortunately, because her presentation was very interesting so far. Actually, as I am personally interested due to my agricultural economics background. So do we expect Ms. Sotiropoulou to join us for a couple of minutes? Can we wait for a couple of minutes, or we should move on to the Q&A session? Okay, we have her here.
I'm here. Just a minute, please.
Okay, great.
I'm sorry for the inconvenience. So I guess that you cannot see my screen again. No. So
no, we see you. Yeah.
Okay, let me share again the presentation.
Okay, we see the presentation.
Okay. So, how circular economy works in Inosporos? We reuse the waste from the winery in order to produce a new product with a new life cycle. We create value to things that didn't have in previous ways. We enrich the product lines, and of course, we go along with the innovation from the beginning of the ideas and for the way of the production. Our values are, of course, the environmental friendly products from the beginning, from the core, from the seed, from the way of the production, and of course, from the packaging, the recycled packaging, the natural products, sustainability in every way of production, the usage of byproducts, so lowering our impact in the environment, and the circular economy. So I would like to sum up with this phrase that waste is not waste until we waste it. and our research and Inosporos is a live example of that. Something that didn't have a life can have another value. So following the rule of ours, we can make waste to treasures, and we promote circular economy, we can promote sustainability and create innovative products and new jobs. So thank you for joining me. I apologize for my connection, and I remain at your disposal for any further questions.
Thank you very much. You were on time. I didn't even need to tell you that you have 2 more minutes, although you have 2 more minutes. So I hope we can, every one of the panelists can now switch on the camera so we can see each other, as Professor Singth very nicely said that virtually we can be together, although physically we are apart due to the COVID-19. That's the good of technology. Now let's see, we have some questions. Okay, I'll start with the last one I see here. It is more handy. So there is a question from Professor Kalokerinos to Mrs. Sotiropoulou. Can you make a general comment on recycling and reuse of byproducts from natural products, such as olive oil, meal waste, nuts, onions, grapes, etc.?
Mm-hmm. I think that now there is a need to utilize every kind of waste. So we have to study and research all the benefits of every kind of foods that we use in order to attract and take all the properties that they have in order to find new ways of utilizing them. I'm mostly in the field of grape, but I can tell that also, apart from the olive oil meal and the pomegranate, are mostly used also in cosmetics, but as food.
I always have this question. I was recently reading an article regarding the waste of the olive oil production. Mm-hmm. Actually, it's toxic, and the very many small olive oil producers do not know what to do with the waste. And I was reading that there is a possibility to make it very useful, to recycle it. But and my question is why this has not happened yet. Actually, I was reading about the polyphenols, that it is rich on polyphenols, which is which polyphenols are more expensive in the market than the olive oil per se. So the byproduct is more profitable than olive oil, at least because the olive oil prices in Greece are low. Yes. For some other reasons. It's not time to discuss. But I had that question: why then don't we use the byproduct of olive oil? And if you know any answer, that would be.
Can I add something to that question?
Yes, Professor Kalokerinos.
Yes, of course.
The reuse of byproducts, like what Dr. Sotiropoulou said, is very, very useful. In fact, I would like to make a parenthesis. Dr. Sotiropoulou is a former student of mine, and she has been awarded during an MSc in the economic department of the University of Chemistry. Is this correct?
It is correct. Yes.
Now, olive oil waste, olive oil meal waste, as they say, it's very, very rich in polyphenols. low amounts of polyphenols are very good for us because they are antioxidants. Very high amount of polyphenols are very bad for the environment. So they say that the olive oil meal waste can be used as fertilizer after some treatment, or we can take back all these polyphenols. Then the question comes, what about the cost for that? And the answer is that it is too expensive now to reuse the olive oil meal waste. That's the answer. It is very expensive, and in fact, as we were discussing yesterday, it seems that we prefer to destroy our environment in order to make money. And this is something which we all have to understand, that there is a compromise between environment and money. So the CO2, for example, as we were discussing yesterday, and now the olive oil meal waste, they harm the environment. But it's expensive to reuse it and not harm the environment. Therefore, we prefer to harm the environment. This is the answer to that. I hope that this covers your question.
Yes, indeed. Although I'll try to find it was in a conference that I saw a presentation. So if I have reached on that paper, I will send it to you. Because
I appreciate that. In fact, so far, all this, the olive oil meal waste, I will say the Greek word katsigaros, imurga.
Yes, katsigaros.
They just throw it in the rivers. They just leave it in the environment. They get rid of it in a rather illegal way. Although there is a decision by the European Union that this should not be thrown to the environment, it has to be collected and recycled. This is very expensive. And therefore, so far they close their eyes and they allow the people to throw it in the water, which is wrong. We poison our environment, which will take ages to recover. If you find these publications, please let me know.
Yes, I will.
Can I add something?
Of course, yes.
Unfortunately, I can see that there is no flexibility to that part. If I have discussed with producers in trying to persuade them to utilize the waste, a lot of them are not flexible, or people, due to the economic crisis, don't want to invest money in order to take all the machines probably that they need in order to make a new investment and produce a new product from the byproducts. So it is also that parameter, unfortunately, that it does not help us.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we have some more questions. So if we have time later,
can I ask our Indian friend?
Of course, yes.
First of all, Professor Singh, I would like to thank you for accepting the invitation. I would like to thank you for joining us and giving this excellent lecture. In fact, I was astonished by the name Athena School of Management. Also, it says wisdom and courage, which is exactly which Athena, the goddess of wisdom, says. I was also astonished by the similarities of the Greek mythology with the Indian mythology. Maybe only the language is different, and maybe the religion, but the mythology are very similar. Can you make a comment on that? Why this happens? Why, first of all, why you choose the word Athena, School of Management, and second, why there is such a similarity between the two mythologies?
Thank you for your kind words, Professor. It's always nice to be recognized across the world. I'll answer your first question. We named Athena because, she is the Greek goddess of wisdom and courage. And as a business school, we always believe that when you want to be leaders in the world of business, in the corporate world, and in society, you need to lead by wisdom and courage. You have to have the wisdom to use courage, and you have to have the courage to use your wisdom. So that was the main inspiration. Personally speaking, I am a keen student of ancient Greek mythology. So it was something which appealed to me. Answering your second question about the similarities between Indian and Greek mythology, yes, it is very, very astounding. The similarities are phenomenal, right? Even down, if I may use, to proto-mythology and the legend of Atlantis. So like you have Atlantis, which Plato talks about in your mythology, we too have something called Dwarka, which is then Indian mythology. So perhaps that shows that maybe, just maybe, millennia ago, there was far more similarity between the cultures and countries than what we see today. So that is something which I really believe is true. And it's fascinating how ancient cultures, even though they were thousands of miles away with different languages, had so many similarities in the history. So I think, and one can go on for, I think, days and weeks talking and discussing about that. And I would love to take that offline with you sometime.
Thank you very much for your answer and for your presence.
My pleasure, sir.
Thank you, Professor Singh, for your answer. And actually, I take the opportunity from Professor Kalokerinos to ask some questions that I see here from the audience, which refer to Professor Bourantas and also to Professor Singh once it's on management. And so the question is from Mr. Stathiadis. Ancient Greeks pursued excellence of character, called arete, while contemporary people are very much interested in personal development. The question is the former included in the latter? So it's a question for all, but I suspect people from management may be more adequate to reply to this question. Thank you.
So may I take it if it's all right?
Yes.
I mean, I think what, in my humble opinion, it's not only ancient Greece. I think if you see all ancient cultures, there was a far more emphasis on bettering the self and bettering society. What we may say there, I mean, it was all about spiritualism. It was about social benefit, and it was making sure that you leave a legacy not counted physically or tangibly in the amount of money you have or the degrees you hold or the land that you own. Perhaps that is something which is a far more recent construct. I would say that if you were to look at the difference in philosophies, perhaps if you look very simply, pre-Roman Empire and post-Roman Empire, it is very different. It was perhaps Rome, which was the first great Western empire, which put far more emphasis on tangibles and on physical ownership. And that is something which, of course, influenced a lot of Western thought. And please understand, because of colonialism and a lot of Asia and Africa and South America being colonized by European powers in the late Middle Ages, that is a thought process which got in some way imprinted even in the rest of the world also. Having said that, I have seen perhaps in the past 2 decades or so, a slight reversal in this thought process, where I think there is a clean belief that benefit and betterment of oneself is not only in material terms, it's in far beyond that. And once you have that kind of as a thought process, you can go ahead. If I may say from a quick perspective, if you see management thought, as my friend Basilio over here will also agree, has moved from benefit of shareholders to benefit of stakeholders. And that's very, very important. That tells you there's a manifest change which is happening in thought processes. If you see green economy is going up, the ESG funds are now funds which are actually growing very much in size. So you're seeing a change in thought. Will this change of thought become permanent? Will this change in thought have a long-term effect on our thinking, on our economy, on our society? Well, my friends, that only time can tell.
Thank you, Professor Petkidis. Excuse me, Mr. Petkidis, you want to add something on?
No, actually, Mr. Singh did a very good job in explaining an ancient virtue and in character. And honestly, Aristotle worked and wrote a lot about areti, and it has to do with human behavior, and it also has to do a lot with the transition in the way that we evaluate things today. We used to look at IQ in the past a lot, and today we tend to talk a lot about emotional intelligence. We're not looking now at the intelligence quotient as much. We try to behaviorally assimilate into our businesses, into the society, the behaviors of the people, the needs of the people. And like Mr. Singh, Professor Singh said, we are looking at the stakeholders more and more and more instead of the shareholders. In many cases, it could be the same, but today the stakeholders have a greater voice. Now, we also need to understand that what is it that motivates, besides a profit, the enterprise moving forward or the corporation moving forward. And like Professor Singh said, these are values that are changing with time, and only the future will tell us where we'll end up.
I agree with you, and I would like to let you know that my dissertation was on corporate social responsibility. So, and actually I tried to bridge Milton Friedman's view on corporate social responsibility and corporate social responsibility. So people ask me, how did you do that? Well, I think in my presentation, I gave some clue, because Milton Friedman actually assumed that people obey the law and the ethical custom of the society. So assuming that, okay, of course, you should maximize your profits, because that's the way to maximize the social benefit. What Milton Friedman didn't see is that there is, we cannot put into small boxes human behavior. So there is also the short term versus the long term, and this is always, this creates many dilemmas. Sometimes we pursue the short term benefit in general, not only profit, rather than the long term. And this is why we have the environmental problems, economic growth.
If I may make one more comment, it's
Yes.
In a day-to-day which we live in, we cannot look at the human that are around us and our co-workers and our colleagues as robots. They have feelings that are being taken from the office to the home and from the home to the office. And all these situations are situations which we learn through experience, we learn on the job, we learn how to deal with these, but also it is important to understand that this is something that we need to continue to build on in our societies, because like in the past, and one of the central aspects of ancient society in Athens was that there should be a foundation in which every generation should build on. So like we've seen technology, for example, evolve. It hasn't evolved within overnight. It's evolved over decades and decades and decades. And every new decade, we're building on top of what has already been built in the past. And we should also focus on filtering what is efficient, what is good, in order to build on these aspects instead of building on the negative aspects.
I couldn't agree more, and the only thing I can add on that is what Goethe said, that we stand on the shoulders of giants. So as you said, every generation builds and builds, and that starts from far back in our history, from the Greek mythology and the Indian mythology. And it's very interesting that all mythologies are connected, and ethically and philosophically speaking, they talk about similar virtues. Okay, I could go on and on, but there is one question for Dr. Kostis. Dr. Kostis, are you with us?
Yes, here I am.
Okay, great. There is one question for you.
Yes.
From a self-interested being to an other-oriented being, do you share the opinion that there is an increasing such trend in our society today? So if there is a trend from the self-interest to the interested to the other.
You mean for the Greek society or in general?
Well, it's not specified, so yeah, you're free to choose.
Yeah. Look, I think there might be considerable critical differences if we study different societies. There are some societies that the cultural background defines the way people behave, and the cultural background is a prerequisite in economic action. And this is something that builds more all over based on the past experiences. So there is not a single question on that, on what you say. Probably in many cases and in many societies, based on the recent experiences of the global financial crisis or the recent pandemic, there is people are trying to get more connected with other people, with other humans in their societies, because this in-group collectivism, as it is called in general, maybe they think this would help them. On the other side, there may be other people that think such circumstances may be a chance to get a more significant significant steps in their career in order to make them be more to get more economic outcomes, be more effective in what they do. So there is not a single question. In my point of view, I think, and this is what happens in the Greek society as well, when such who have such developments, people concentrate in teams, in groups, in order to feel more safe regarding those developments. So in general, I think probably there is a tendency more for in-group collectivism or for trusting other people because of this climate of uncertainty in which we live today.
Mm-hmm. I would like to add to this on this question that I believe that human nature, contrary to technology that evolves very fast, basically remains the same. And I would like to make a connection here with Professor Kostis on psychology lecture that also Professors Singth on the question that ancient Greeks had raised, if arete, virtue, can be taught in schools. And similarly, a question could be asked if leadership, if being a leader can be taught, and or what percent is in the genes and what percent is in the environment, whereas in the environment we put also school and education. What do you think?
This is what is called dual inheritance theory. This is what you say.
The question is on all, you can everybody.
Okay, I'm sorry, I took
you can start.
Okay, thank you. Dual inheritance theory says that apart from human behavior can be explained through the genes that come from one gene to another gene, from parents to their child, and so on. While there is also another part of the way people behave that may should be found on the way people try to mimic other people, and the behaviors of our parents and not the genes are those that develop the way we behave. However, what I don't completely agree with this first thing you said, because we have seen that the last decades from 1980 and so on, last 4 or 5 decades, there is a great change on the way people behave, and this is something Engelhardt noticed on 1988, and Norris and Engelhardt call it cultural backlash hypothesis, which is the fact that people are turning from traditional and materialistic choices and values to post-materialistics, because they have already reached a high level of income or welfare or prosperity, and now what they care about is not so much economic outcomes, but other issues that are more post-materialistic, like the environment, sexual liberalization, gender equalities, and other issues that are not such materialistic and are considered as post-materialistics. So this is something that can be called as an incremental change that happens last decades. And this is something new for economic science and social sciences, because now we are available to have data to see that change. Up to recent decades, 20 years ago, we had not availability of data measuring how people behave. Now we can do so, at least in a better way, because there are many research results from organizations such as the World Value Survey or European Social Study Survey or European Value Study, which into waves release data on how people think and behave. So we can see that there are some changes which up to now we thought culture was not changing, and it was something considered stable. For instance, Hofstede on 1980 considered there are 5 values of how people behave. Then there come 6th value, but the scores each society received in 1980, the same scores received the same societies in 2010. This was the way of thinking for many academics, that cultural background can be considered as constant over time, but actually maybe this is something that now can be drawn down as an argument.
Professor Singth, you want to add something?
I'll just add that I believe that the statement that leaders are only born is a big myth, which is propagated by a lot of people who would rather make sure that they keep what they inherit, and it is perhaps a legacy of the time when all over the world we had kings and noble houses, and they said leaders are only born, as I said in Latin, sang real. I don't think that is true anymore. If you ask me, in my humble opinion, and I am a professor of management, so I keep things very simple, leadership has 2 basic facets to it. One is aptitude, the other is attitude. Aptitude is a function of how you're taught. So yes, that function of leadership is something which can be taught. Attitude is a function of your environment, on how you're raised, how you are brought up. So one cannot happen without the other. It is the yin and yang. It is complementary to each other. You have to have aptitude. Without attitude is not leadership, and attitude without aptitude again is not leadership. So to have aptitude, you need to be taught the aptitude, definitely, but the attitude, which is so important, is a function of your environment, how you're raised, how you're brought up. And those families who get it right are the ones who end up creating leaders. And I think the biggest example of that
is perhaps the biggest gift that Greece has given to the entire world, which is democracy. And democracy, if you see, as a function of government, is the basic tenet is you don't inherit leadership. Our leaders are created, and anyone and everyone can be a leader. So I think that is a real function of ancient Greek thought, which is democracy, and that is manifested, of course, in how all our lives are being led and taken forward today. Thank you.
Thank you for your answer. Indeed, it's very optimistic because many studies try to figure out how and why, what happened in ancient Athens at that period of time, and suddenly the institution of democracy emerged. So, Mr. Petkidis, you seem to...
The only thing I would like to, that I could add to what has been said already is what my grandfather and my father passed on to me, which is to lead by example. You should, I think this is what our children learn. This is what our children see. This is where the foundation for their moral and ethical foundation is built. So it is important that we take this not only in our home, but also in our everyday life and in our workplace. If we behave and act the way that we believe that others should act and behave as well, then I think this becomes contagious. It is probably more contagious than COVID.
All right. Before I move on to the next question, does anybody want to add anything? Okay, so there is one question from Professor Pathos to all of us. How do you understand the social mobility between classes in our days in relation to the new productive forces created by the micro-technological evolution? Anybody want to jump in? Feel free.
I think the question is very, very timely in regards to what we are going through today. And I think that we will see a differentiation from the past because of being able to work from home. We are going to see that a lot of things are going to change in the interaction of people, and social mobility is definitely going to be affected in the future because we are not going to be influenced as much necessarily by the presence, but by the results being provided by the person that we have in front of us, or actually at the other end of a computer screen. So we're basically going to be seeing more effectively the results in what is being, the bottom line of what is being produced by each individual, and not necessarily those aspects of the character which might make an individual more socially acceptable versus another.
Thank you, Mr. Petkidis.
If I may just share my two bit on this. I think technology and especially what's happening now in the COVID crisis has got two different facets again to it. The first facet, of course, is the very fact that for now knowledge has become a function which is not the purview of the few. It's become democratic that way. Hence, it is not very important for us to teach the young people in this world not how to write, give the right answers, but that is something which is now very easily available. The key differentiator is going to be how to ask the right question. And those of us who can ask the right questions will pretty much actually be able to accelerate our growth in this world. The second part, which I would like to state, is because of what has happened in the past 7 months, we're going to see a lot of challenges in addressing aspirations and reality. A child sitting in Greece, for example, maybe in Athens, talking to a child sitting in Delhi or in Bombay, and both of them talking to a child sitting in New York, are going to have three very different realities. But the aspiration may be for the reality in New York. Now, how do you ensure that someone who is sitting in Bombay or in Delhi or in Athens is able to understand the difference between the reality of what they are in and what they aspire to be? Now, from a emotional or a societal point of view, that may be a challenge. But if you ask me, that's also a great opportunity, because now that drives underprivileged, unempowered people to even succeed far more. And remember, the ultimate cloak of protection the privileged have is that of the ignorance of the masses. When people stop becoming ignorant, when people start having knowledge, when people know the truth, you always see progress happening. It's not a very pretty sight. It's not a very easy journey, but that is what typically happens. So I think we should embrace this change. It is going to be challenging, but then all change is always challenging. Thank you.
Thank you. And there is one more question for Professor Pierrakos. I hope he's here with us. All right. The question is the following. A proposal from, it's a proposal that you did in your presentation, a proposal for primary healthcare service organizations. The question is, could you elaborate a little more on the proposal?
Yes, of course, it is a very complicated theme on that, because nowadays things concerning the healthcare system in Greece are very complicated. We can say a few things that primary healthcare is based on three pillars. First of all, the outpatient clinics in Greece of hospitals, and secondly, the local health centers. And thirdly, on the private health sector for medical outpatient clinics. That means that all that sector of primary healthcare has to be organized in one organized center. And the base of that organization should be the public health center, the local health centers. And according to WHO, local health teams that been based on family doctors, community nurses, psychologists, and all that health workers should work on local basis on the network. So here does not exist, for example, the home visit, the home care in Greece for coming from a health center and the healthcare system, and there is only exist the social and social care that is financed by the Ministry of not from health ministry, but coming from the insurance organizations. So if we want to organize the primary healthcare networks in local community, we have to emphasize on the local health teams. And the coordinator is the nurses that has to be the coordinators of that local health teams. And the first issue is to assess the health needs of the population. That's the most important thing for the primary health care. The second thing is that we have to offer services that fit to and face the problems of the healthcare in firstly in the individuals, families, and local communities. The problem here is that the healthcare system is organized, is focused on the outpatient clinics of hospitals. That means that there is a it is hospital oriented. So the people, if they have a problem, they just go to the hospital. We have to change that and emphasize on the local healthcare centers and the local healthcare teams. This is a great movement that has to be in the healthcare system in Greece. And I think that this is the answer on the problem that we have here and the crisis that we have with that situation of public health and epidemic, because of the fact that social communities and the local communities has not the support of the healthcare system in local association. So I think that if we emphasize on the local health teams and we emphasize on organization and use of electronic health records, then we could be able to organize a system that support individuals, support families, and support local communities, and especially the needs in and face the problem that people have in between the lack of interface between primary and secondary healthcare means the hospitals. So the problem here is that we do not have a support in local communities, first of all, and secondly, if the people have a problem, there is not a mechanism to help them and lead them to the hospital. So the people is being in a weak position in order to ask from a doctor for services and negotiate with the provider of health about his health and how to organize all that treatment. And this is a problem of the healthcare in Greece. And another, that's why that's why we have a very high out-of-pocket payment for primary healthcare and medicine. So we have to reorganize healthcare system and focus in primary healthcare and change that the main point from hospitals to the primary and local community.
Thank you, Professor Pierrakos. I would like to add something on what you said. When I was in the United States doing my PhD, and I had a medical problem, I went to the doctor, and it surprised me the fact that when I went to get the medication, I got the exact quantity that the doctor prescribed. Here in Greece, this does not happen. And this is a huge waste. I don't know what happens in India. You go to the pharmacy and you buy the whole box, which of course contains much more medication than what the doctor prescribed. And what happens to in the excess quantity? You just waste it. You throw it away because after a year it will be expired. What's your opinion on this?
Yes,
issue?
as I said before, there is a lack of national safety and quality health service standards. This is another point of healthcare system in Greece. Of course, there is a difference between Greek healthcare system, which is public, and USA healthcare system, which is private. But the main issues are the same. The main ideas are the same, how the system has to work. So the emphasis here is not on the standards of treatment, but the emphasis is just to prescribe the medicine, and that's all. So we can use the word that the cost benefit of that treatment does not measure, and we do not have the indicators that could help us in order to improve the effectiveness of healthcare system. That's another problem, that is the lack of health standards in Greece. So there's another need on that. Additionally, with electronic health records that does not exist.
Thank you. I would like to ask you if it's already 12:37. We were supposed to stop at 12:30, but I have permission, because our session is so interesting, I have permission from the host to keep it for a few more minutes. Do you agree? If there is any objection, we can stop now. If not, I have a few questions to ask to you all. Do you agree, or we should close it? Okay, should I receive that as a yes?
Mm-hmm.
I have a disagreement. However, I do need to take 2 minutes.
Okay, only 2 minutes. Great.
So
there is a last question regarding brain drain. Let me see it here. So brain drain can be considered the most devastating hit. To what extent can large and small corporations contribute to reverse it, and what assistance do they need from governmental authorities to do so? I suspect this question is for, the problem is mainly in Greece. Well, India, I know millions of Indians in the US thriving and prospering. So probably India has a similar problem. And so this question is to you all regarding brain drain and how can small and large corporations contribute to reverse it.
Let me give you a brief answer on this from Greece. Brain drain has been caused because there haven't been employment positions in the Greek market, number one. Number two, the employment positions and the employment benefits which are being given in Greece are not at par with the rest of the European countries. And number three, when you have an executive, or you want to bring in somebody who's very, very highly qualified to Greece, and let's take a theoretical number of 100,000 euros. If somebody's making 100,000 euros or 100 euros, and this person is being taxed practically 60% in Greece, means that they're making 40,000 net in their pocket. Now, any executive, anybody who values their talent, who has a price that they consider they're worth, they will definitely look to go somewhere where they can get this. So obviously, they will go to Germany, they will go to the UK, they will go to France, they will go to the United States. They will try to find markets where their knowledge and their know-how is valued and appreciated more. So in order to be able to revert the brain drain, we do have to create incentives for these people to come back and for the newer generations not to leave. If you have an environment which is welcoming, an environment which rewards entrepreneurship, or an environment which rewards your know-how, then obviously you'll be a lot more attractive, and being more attractive, you will be able to reverse the brain drain.
I'll just add a bit from the Indian context, if that's all right. India had a severe brain drain problem from the 1960s to the 1990s. And this was absolutely in sync and directly a function of the Indian economy and the growth rate of the economy. Since the 1990s, the early 2000s, the Indian economy has been the fastest growing economy in the world. And we don't have a brain drain problem anymore because you have enough of opportunities, enough of jobs, enough of compensation happening within India itself. Yes, of course, there's a small proportion which still goes up, but then that if you see it on the population structure, it's much lesser. I think what's very important to reverse brain drain is to strengthen your internal economy and internal opportunities. It is as simple as that. It's not rocket science. If you have a strong economy, if you have good opportunities, why will a Greek or an Indian leave a country which they're comfortable with, where they are born with people they know, a language and culture they know, and go across? They only do that because they do not get the right opportunities in their own countries. It's not rocket science. Create opportunities, create funding for startups, create an avenue where young people feel that they can grow and they can make an impact and they have a voice to be heard. And you will definitely see brain drain reducing, if not completely finished. That is my humble 2-bit.
Thank you very much. And I would like to thank you all. It's well, technology gives us the opportunity to be very close virtually. However, it's slightly different than being physically together in a room. The only comment I have is how remarkable I find the fact that our lectures combine each other: psychology, institutions, incentives. Mr. Petkidis just said very well. Opportunities for companies. Ms. Sotiropoulou talked about such a company. I bet if we ask her, she will have many complaints regarding the institutions in Greece and how many obstacles these institutions put her in her way. So I would like to close this session. Thank you very much, everybody. And we'll be actually, yeah, now we have the long break, and then there is the last session with Professor Kosteletos on humanities. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, the attendees and the participants, for their questions. Bye-bye.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure being here.
Thank you.
very much.
Dear Professor Athanasios Chymis, thank you very much for your substantial and productive contribution to this session. It was really excellent. We give the credits to all the participants of this session. Thank you very much. We are coming back at 1300 sharply to the second session of the day. Okay, the moderator will be Mr. Pierrakos. Thank you very much.
Thank you.